The Mountain West and Pac-12 are going to fight on the field to figure out who's the best West Coast Group of Six conference. But the Pac-12 already has one big win over the Mountain West. What's up? This is Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff, and on today's show, we're also going to get into UNLV basketball's schedule because, hey, they're just going to go undefeated in non-conference play. It'll be easy, right? So the Mountain West and Pac-12 are done fighting over money. They've come to a settlement. They're not actually going to go through any sort of court process to figure out how much money the Pac-12 is going to pay the Mountain West for stealing half of the conference. But we still don't actually know the amount of money that the Pac-12 is paying to the Mountain West. If you're just hearing about this, the Mountain West lost half of its conference members, basically half. San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, the sort of main three there, Utah State's in there as well. And they're all going to the Pac-12, Fresno State as well. And with those schools leaving, the Mountain West was supposed to get a huge payday. Each of those schools was supposed to pay an exit fee, roughly $20 million per school, and the Pac-12 was supposed to pay a poaching fee to the Mountain West of $55 million for taking 5 schools. Now, the exit fee for the schools, that's an agreement that those schools had signed with the conference, and the poaching fee was actually a part of a scheduling agreement that Oregon State and Washington State made with the Mountain West because they were a 2-team conference and needed to play somebody in football, and the Mountain West came and helped them and gave them games. And as a part of that agreement, they signed there was a clause in there about poaching that said, hey, if the Pac-12 steals a bunch of members from the Mountain West, this is exactly how much money the Pac-12 will have to pay the Mountain West. Now, despite all of that being in contracts, the Mountain West is not going to get all of that money. All of that money combined was supposed to be $155 million. The Mountain West is not getting $155 million. How much they're getting, we don't know officially, but Mark Ziegler, who covers San Diego State for the San Diego Union-Tribune, he wrote a story last week and gave us some pretty good indicators of what that is. He said it's less than half of $155 million, but more specifically, he had a source that said that it was 47 cents on the dollar, which is for some reason is a complicated way to just say it's 47% of what that payout was going to be. So 47% of $155 million is $72.85 million. It's probably 73. Maybe they agreed on a 0.85 for some random reason, but it's probably like $73 million that the Mountain West is getting from the Pac-12. Mark Ziegler went into a little bit more detail without having the exact numbers. It's just under $10 million from each of the schools that are leaving the conference. So in this case, San Diego State is going to pay the Mountain West less than $10 million as their exit fee, right? And then the Pac-12 as a whole is paying less than $30 million in those poaching fees. So it all ultimately comes down to, or at least sounds like it comes down to, $73 million. This is a nightmare for the Mountain West. And I know that this number or this ballpark has been out there by other reports and other educated guesses, right, over the last year or so. But getting $73 million instead of $155 million is a disaster. I've said it before. I don't understand how they had these agreements contractually signed and didn't get all the money. Like, what was the Pac-12's argument to not have to pay this money? Like, hey, we signed an agreement that says we owe you this much money if we steal your teams. We stole your teams. We don't agree to that. Oh, they signed it under duress. What duress? Right? Like, okay, they came to the Mountain West looking for something. And I says, sure. But here, sign this clause. Like, what are we talking duress? It's a stupid thing. They didn't have to agree to it. They could have just played fewer football games, right? So I've never understood that this entire time. But apparently, the Mountain West wasn't able to recoup all the money they were supposed to get. So instead of getting $155 million, they're getting 73. And you lost all your best brands or most of your best programs, right? That's a complete disaster for this conference. Losing the teams is obviously the bigger part here, right? But losing them and then not being able to get the money that you should have gotten. Because here's the thing. If UNLV decides to leave, Air Force was the other big brand that they wanted to save, why would UNLV be like, oh, okay, we signed a grant of rights deal and we have to pay you this much money? No, we don't. Nah, we're just going to sue and settle for half of that. Like what's stopping there's not, what's going to prevent other schools from leaving in the future if they want to leave, if they know, hey, we can just follow this precedent that was in place when all of the schools left for the Pac-12. We know we agreed to pay you $20 or $50 million or whatever it's going to be. Nah, we don't need to do that. Complete disaster for the Mountain West. Now, for the individual schools, there's two different, I think, sets of schools that are interesting to look at. The first one is the schools leaving the Mountain West to go to the Pac-12. So San Diego State in this instance, they're going to pay less than $10 million to leave the Mountain West. We also don't know how much TV revenue both of the conferences are going to make, but it's been reported by different people that the Pac-12 is getting more money and that it's a few million more, that maybe 5 million is too high. Mark Ziegler in his story guesstimated that it was 3.3 million more. Is that an actual number he's been told and he just wrote it as an estimate because he wasn't allowed to report that? I don't know. Is that him just saying, hey, people told me a few $1,000,000, so that's the number I went with? I couldn't tell you how serious that is, but we'll use it. $3.3 million. If you're San Diego State today and you are going to get $3.3 million more being in the Pac-12 than the Mountain West, and you have to pay $9.5 million, whatever under $10 million ends up being, that means after 3 years, you will sort of have broken even on this move. And then years 4 and beyond, you're simply going to be making more money than you would have had you stayed in the Mountain West. So as long as this agreement lasts for 4+ years, it's a good move for the San Diego States and the Boise States of the world. Also important note, they're in a better conference than what the current Mountain West is, right? So it's probably going to be a good decision for those schools if we're just looking at that sort of monetary comparison. Obviously, there's going to be more comparisons. There's going to be other things in the future that play into this, but just looking at the TV money and this poaching fee money, probably going to be good because once they get to year 4, they're just going to be making more and more money. Now, on UNLV's side, according to Mark Ziegler's story, the amount that the Mountain West is going to get means that UNLV is going to get $14.9 million from this payout. Again, if you forgot or weren't paying it or haven't heard before, the way that the Mountain West kind of convinced UNLV and Air Force to stay was to say, hey, if you guys stay in the conference, we're going to pay you more than everybody else. Because the Mountain West is like, these schools are leaving, they owe us a bunch of money, we're going to split that up. And so Air Force and Mountain West, Air Force and UNLV, we're going to get roughly, I think it was 25% of the money coming in from the Pac-12 and its departing schools. Had that been $155 million, that would have been a really nice payday for UNLV and Air Force. But because it got cut in half, and there's some other stipulations that the money can go to some different fees and stuff to bring new members in is actually what the, I think, second tier was. But ultimately, it's going to come down to about $15 million the UNLV gets, which is better than not getting any money, right? Like, notably, it's better than not getting any money. And it's $15 million, but we're not clearing $20 million, right? Which seems tough. Right, because UNLV chose to stay in the worst conference. UNLV chose to stay in the conference that's getting a lower media rights deal. And now they're getting less money than they probably thought they were getting when they agreed to this last offseason. They're getting less money than they probably thought they were going to get. And so the math is a little bit more complicated for UNLV because they're actually going to get $15 million. And they don't have to pay the $9-ish million. So that's a $26 million gap there for UNLV. So it will take a few more years to make that up, right? If it's $3.3 million, we're talking about like 8 years or something before the profitability or opposite of profitability comes into play for UNLV staying in the Mountain West. So it'll take a little bit longer. However, I would argue that they'd still be better in the Pac-12 over the next 8 years because it's going to be a better conference. And getting into the college football playoff or getting into the NCAA tournament is going to bring you additional value that's more than just the media rights television deal and the poaching fees that you're going to be paid. I think if you asked anybody right now, whether it's a UNLV fan, Dan Mullen, a player on the team, anybody in the athletic department, hey, would you rather have $14.9 million or be ahead of Boise State in the playoff pecking order when we get to the end of November? You would rather be ahead of Boise State in the pecking order. But the reality is, we've talked about this on this show, if UNLV and Boise State finish this year with the same record, and even if Boise State has one fewer win than UNLV, Boise State's probably going to the playoff over UNLV. UNLV's schedule is bad. It's going to be one of the bottom 15 or 20 schedules in all of college football, right? It's a bad schedule. So your chances to get in the playoff are less, right? It's less likely you go to the playoffs in the Mountain West than if they had gone to the Pac-12. And I think you would take that over the $15 million payday that's coming in. Obviously, that's a hypothetical. UNLV can still go to the playoffs. They could still end up being ahead of Boise State by being the best Group of 6 team, right? This doesn't preclude them from that, but they would have a better chance if they were in the Pac-12, right? And I should say that going forward, being in a better conference gives you a better chance, right? Same is going to be true in basketball, where this is probably going to be a one-bid conference most seasons, so you need to win the Mountain West tournament, which has been the case for UNLV for over a decade, and they haven't done it, right? So there's a lot that goes into it that's more than just the money. The money part, I understand why UNLV would do it and be like, oh, cool, we get a bunch of money and we don't have to pay a bunch of money. We're in great shape. But ultimately, you're in a lesser conference. I think one other way to phrase this is how much, if you were UNLV, how much money would you take to join the MAC? Like, you're stepping down to the worst conference in college football, but you're going to get paid. How much money would you take? Like, if somebody presented that to Eric Harper and said, hey, we're going to pay you $5 million to join the MAC, 10, 20, like, what's the number? Obviously, if they said, we're going to pay you $250 million, welcome to the MAC, UNLV. But like, what's that number? Because I'm not sure it's $15 million. I'm not sure they would take $15 million to join a worse conference, which is effectively what they did. Now, I also want to get into some UNLV basketball because their schedule's out. First off, there are 3 exhibition games at the Thomas and Mack Center, so 3 home exhibition games, and they're scrimmages, they're practice games, but it's Utah, BYU, and Missouri, right? I did not know about the Utah one until this. That's great. Like, that's phenomenal. The Utah one is apparently very early, October 7th, while the other 2 are October 24th and 29th. So that's really early, right? The regular season starts November 3rd. So one of these exhibitions is almost a full month before the regular season starts, but you're going to get 3 exhibition games at home. I don't know how much you care about those. Personally, I don't, like, from a like win-loss standpoint. So as a fan, you'd be like, who whatever, like, but watching the team and seeing that will be interesting. But after that, it kind of sucks from a home schedule, right? Like, if you look at the home games that UNLV has, it's Northern Arizona, it's Samford, then Stanford. Those are back-to-back, by the way, so that's fun. Eastern Washington, UTRGV, which is University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, Cal Poly, Westminster University, and then North Dakota. Those are the home games for UNLV at the Thomas and Mack Center this year. That's terrible. Like, that's genuinely awful. Stanford is the only, like, notable name on there, and they're not that good at basketball. Like, right now in Bart Torvik, which rosters aren't finalized, and Torvik sometimes a little behind on rosters and everything, because I think it's one guy doing the whole thing. UNLV's ahead of Stanford, right, in Bart Torvik. Stanford is not in the top 100. So That's like an awful home schedule. That's like one of the worst possible home schedules you could get. Now, the Players Era tournament is in Las Vegas. They're going to play Kansas and then either West Virginia or Auburn, and then another decent team or at least decent name. That's in Vegas, so you don't have to travel for it, but I don't believe that's part of your season ticket package. And then they're going to play in Henderson against Washington State. It's a better name than Eastern Washington. It's a better name than Westminster and Cal Poly, but they're not any good at basketball either. That's not a notable opponent to play. So that home schedule is horrible. Like, that sucks if you're getting UNLV basketball season tickets, and those are the games you get, especially now when we get into conference play. And, San Diego State's not on the schedule anymore. Oh, that kind of sucks. Nevada and New Mexico are, so those two still around, but like, who's on it now? Oh, okay. That's fun. We get to play UTEP or yeah, that's fun. Grand Canyon will be fun. They'll bring more fans than UNLV has, so maybe not that fun. But it's just like, that's a terrible schedule. I feel bad for anybody having to buy UNLV season tickets because what the hell are you going to watch, right? Like, what are we doing here? Now, on the actual schedule, Bart Torvik has UNLV at 98th right now. Again, take the numbers loosely because not everything's finalized, and even then it's still a preseason ranking, but 98th right now. If you go through this schedule and look at Bart Torvik rankings of all the other teams, UNLV plays 15 games, only 5 of them, non-conference games, only 5 of them are against teams currently in the top 100. Now, Stanford is 101, so they're very, very close to that top 100 mark. But only 5 of these potential opponents opponents are in the top 100. And there's a legitimate chance that only one of them is even top 50, and that's Kansas in the Players Era tournament. It's hard to say that for certain because they would play West Virginia, who's 59th, or Auburn, who's 33rd in the second round. And then their final game in the Players Era could be Notre Dame, who's 82nd, Rutgers, who's 72nd, or Houston and Florida, who are both top 5. So, like, there's a chance they play a top 5 team and a top 10 team in the Players Era tournament, or they get the 82nd, 59th, and 10th best teams. So it's kind of hard to say exactly how high they'll be up, but there's a good chance UNLV only plays one team that's in the top 50. So this is not like a really difficult schedule. Now, on the other side of this, one thing that I don't like is they play a bunch of teams, 5 teams to be exact, that are between 101 and 201 in Bart Torvik's rankings. Stanford is the 101 team, right? And you obviously, you're going to play 15 games. You can't avoid this type of team entirely. But the reason I don't like these games is because these are the games that UNLV can lose relatively easily. They tend to lose these games frequently. That hurts you a lot when it comes to your resume and everything, right? Take Eastern Washington. Right now, Bart Torvik has them at 184. It's not that crazy for a team ranked 184 to beat a team ranked 98. That's not like a wild thing that that just doesn't happen very often. It happens. And so they're going to play 5 games like that against teams that could realistically beat UNLV, could come to Thomas and Mack and beat UNLV. And if you beat them, you don't gain much, right? UNLV beating Eastern Washington, that's going to be probably a quad 3 game. Winning a quad 3 game doesn't help you very much. Losing a quad 3 game hurts quite a bit. So, what it means from this schedule, right? You have 5 games against teams that are better than you, 5 games against teams that are worse than you, but probably not terrible, and then 5 games against teams that we'll just say are terrible for the time being. Those will change. Some of the teams that are terrible might be a little bit better. Some of the teams that are slightly behind you might jump you. It'll change. But just looking at it from a simplistic standpoint, 5 that are better than you, 5 that are awful, and 5 that are just a little bit worse. Let's say UNLV beats the 5 teams that are significantly worse than them. And let's just say they lose to Kansas, right? It's probably a safe bet. That means the other games, the other 9 games on the schedule is what's going to determine UNLV's at-large chances in the NCAA tournament, at least going into conference play. This will determine, hey, they're completely out of it, or they've got a chance if they do really well in Mountain West play. Will be those 9 games. And I think the main thing is they can't afford to exchange the sort of bad loss for a good win. And what I mean by that is if you lose to Eastern Washington, but hey, you beat SMU, those balance out, but balancing out gets you where? 98th in the country. It doesn't get you high enough to go into the NCAA tournament. So if they lose to Eastern Washington or one of those teams, which will probably happen, right? Like, I mean, they play 5 of them. The odds are their win probability in those 5 are probably going to be like between 70%, around 65 to 80%, depending on how good or bad they are. You're probably going to lose 1, maybe even 2 of those games. So losing one, but then beating, because they'll also, by the way, be around like 30% to beat San Diego State, SMU, Notre Dame, whoever they end up playing, right? They'll probably win one of those. Winning one and losing one just balances out, and you're not an NCAA tournament team. So what it means is the UNLV needs to win more of the games against the top 100 teams than they lose to the teams behind them. And to me, the number that I look at, if we want to put a number on the non-conference record, it's 12-3. And because that means that UNLV will have gone +2 in this equation that I'm making up right now, where they will have 2 more wins against teams in the top 100 than they do losses against teams below them. And that might be they beat San Diego State and SMU, and they beat all of the teams below them, right? Awesome. It could also mean they lost to Eastern Washington, but they beat San Diego State, SMU, and then, West Virginia in the Players Era Classic, right? That would be good too. So I think that to me is sort of the mark there is can they get to sort of 12-3? Because if they just beat all the teams they're better than and lose to all the teams that are ahead of them, they go 10-5. So can they kind of go +2 on that marker? If that's what they can do, and you're 12-3 going into Mountain West play, and you have, in theory, 2 quad 1 wins, maybe it's quad 1 and quad 2, but 2 quad 1 wins, and you're 12-3 going into conference play, we might actually be talking about, hey, what does UNLV need to do to go to the NCAA tournament? So I think that's where I see this non-conference schedule. Obviously, I feel like I'm talking in absolutes about a college basketball schedule, and I'll be the first person to tell you your record doesn't actually matter as much as maybe your metrics do, because like I sit here and tell you, yeah, you need to win some of them, but like if they were to lose to San Diego State, SMU, Kansas, West Virginia, and we'll just say Notre Dame, if they lost all 5 of those, but they lost all 5 of them by like 2 or 3 points, that's going to help them in their metrics, even though they're all losses. If you lose to Kansas, who's the 10th best team in the country, by 2 points, Ken Pom and Bart Torvik, they're going to be like, oh, Jesus, UNLV's actually pretty good, right? So that'll help. And if you lose to all of them by 2 or 3 points, and then you beat all the teams behind you by like 20 or 30, your metrics are going to go very high despite only being 10-5 and not having any notable wins. It'll be like, oh, they beat the hell out of the crappy teams, and they're very close to beating the good teams. They must be pretty close to a good team themselves. So the record is not always super important, but I kind of view it as like you do need to win some games. So 12-3 is sort of a good sort of baseline for if they're 12-3, the NCAA tournament might be a real conversation. Anything worse than that, and they're probably not going to be going to the NCAA tournament as an at-large. Maybe they can win the conference tournament now that, big bad San Diego State's out of here, something like that. Now, a couple of things I wanted to end the show on. Go through a little bit quickly here. First off, the Mountain West posted a video ranking the top 5 quarterbacks in the conference. And there was a notable admission. Jackson Arnold of UNLV was not there. UTEP's quarterback is on the list, which seems bizarre. Wyoming's quarterback was on the list, also seems bizarre. The 2 that seem to be a consensus across college football is Alejado at Hawaii and Zarka at Air Force are both good quarterbacks, potentially the best 2, but every national ranking of quarterbacks usually has Jackson Arnold very close to Liam Zarka, Air Force's quarterback. So to then not have him at least 3rd on this list, or at least in the top 5, seemed pretty bizarre. But I think we can blame Dan Mullen for this. He has not named a starting quarterback. Dan Mullen has not made Jackson Arnold the starting quarterback. And maybe it's Arnold's fault because he's not good enough at practice or something. I don't know. But like, not if Dan Mullen's not even willing to say he's the best quarterback on his team, the Mountain West can't come out and say he's one of the 5 best in the conference. So I think it's ultimately Dan Mullen's fault that UNLV didn't get a little more recognition from the Mountain West. Also, in football, the first AP poll is out, and there are no group of 6 teams in the top 25. Shouldn't be surprised by that. Nobody likes to rank group of 6 teams. We don't know anything about them. But Boise State would be the highest based on the others receiving votes category. They got 43 votes, which would have put them at 28th if they had just kept extending the poll forever. Boise State would be 28th. That's the highest team in the group of 6. Navy was actually second with they were 31st, second among group of 6, but 31st on this list. I think of every ranking, whether it's an analytical one or just a writer who's coming up with, hey, these are the best group of 6 teams, or these are the group of 6 teams that could make the playoff, stuff like that. Navy's never hasn't been mentioned. Their SP Plus preseason ranking is decent. It's solid, but I just have not seen them ranked. But AP voters like Navy more than everybody not named Boise State in the group of 6th. Then UNLV comes into place. UNLV actually tied with New Mexico. Would have been 39th on this list. So based on that, AP poll voters think that UNLV is the tied, but is the 3rd best chance to go to the playoff among group of 6 teams, which is still pretty good. Just surprised to see Navy there. Last thing for you. Ross Dellinger covers college football for Yahoo Sports, and Ross Dellinger writes a lot of stories that I end up talking about on this show because he's good at his job. But there are a lot of Ross Dellinger tweets that I'm just like, Jesus. Why are people in college football so stupid? And his name to me is associated with just like, oh, people in college sports are going to make the dumbest decisions. He tweeted out, ESPN, the rights holder of the playoff, is socializing with the college football playoff leaders a 16-team format with 4 play-in games for the final 4 spots in the field. That would be seeds 13 through 16. First off, what the hell does socializing with college football playoff leaders? You mean meeting? But that is just a 20-team playoff being masqueraded as a 16-team playoff. That is just trying to sneak 4 more teams into a 16-team playoff and for some reason not calling it a 20-team playoff. Because if you're going to have play-in games, what that means is you would have 16 play 17 and 15 play 18 and 13 would play 20. I skipped one. 14 would play 19. That would just be extra playoff games. Right. And maybe they want to have them at conference championship weekend because we're going to get rid of those for some stupid reason. But like, what are we doing? If you want to go to a 20-team playoff, just go to a 20-team playoff. You don't have to call it a 16-team playoff. Just do whatever the hell you want. People will complain about it. People will not be mad enough to stop watching the sport and stop making you money. Just go to the 20-team playoff if you want the 20-team playoff. I've said it before. I prefer a 24-team playoff where every conference champion gets in. Yes, even the group of 6. That's my preference. It also gives you a bye to the top 8, so most teams would still be playing for something even into the final week of the season. Hey, we need to get the bye, right? The top 2 or 3 teams are probably going to have that wrapped up, but most teams are going to be playing for something, whether it's a playoff spot, whether it's a bye, whatever. You're probably playing for something. There's still meaning in every game, or as many as possible in college football, would be more in this case when it comes to the postseason. But don't try to be coy. Don't try to be like, oh, they're too stupid to realize if we call it a 16-team playoff and do a play-in with 20 teams, they won't know it's 20 teams. We'll know. Just go to 20 or 24. Just do it. We all know you're going to do it. Just do it. It'll be fine. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Technically Correct with Tyler Bischoff.